Hello everyone, I'm Babli Jonathan and this is the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital. Dwelling our top stories as the international community accuses the Cameroon government of gross human rights violation in the northwest and southwest regions of the country within the context of the deepening Anglophone crisis. Efforts are now being intensified to prevent pictures showing atrocities committed by elements of the national armed forces in the crisis-stricken northwest and southwest regions of the country from spreading further on the internet. The Secretary of State in charge of the National Gendarmerie, the Secretary of State for Defense in charge of the National Gendarmerie, has instructed all elements of that corps of the National Armed Forces to quit all social media and networks. And in sports, Senegal saves the African continent from the shame of successive defeats at the ongoing 2018 FIFA World Cup in Russia. The Teranga Lions of Senegal just defeated Poland 2-0 in their first encounter. Those were top stories. Thanks for joining me in this edition of the 6 p.m. primetime newscast on Equinoxe television as the Anglophone crisis deepens with accusations streaming in on the Cameroon government, with the last one coming from the non-governmental organization Amnesty International, which accused the Cameroon government of gross human rights violation in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. Particularly, elements of the National Gendarmerie have been cautioned by the State Defense Secretariat boss to stay off social media and networks, notably Facebook and WhatsApp. They have been urged to exit or quit any network or WhatsApp group they belong to, otherwise they will be facing severe sanctions. And the information is contained in a press release signed by Galax Etoga, who is the State Defense Secretary, the Defense Secretary in charge of the National Gendarmerie, and this is aimed at prohibiting publication of shocking images posted by gendarme officers on social media showing human rights violation in the crisis-stricken northwest and southwest regions of the country, notably atrocities committed by elements of the National Gendarmerie within the context of the deepening Anglophone crisis. And because of the deepening crisis, the first meeting of the committee in charge of the development of the Bakassi Peninsula could not take place in the Indian division. It had to be transported, or it had to take place rather in the Fako division, precisely in Limbe, because of the difficult situation in that part of the country. And during that meeting in Limbe, the participants discussed strategies on how to speed up the development of the peninsula. Derija Osmo.
After the installation of the coordinator for the Bakassi Development Program in Isangele Bakassi recently by the Southwest Governor, its members are meeting for the first committee meeting, this time in Limbe. Critics say the tense nature of the current Anglophone crisis must have forced this Indian program to be discussed, but in Fako Division. Mr. Fawan Lawrence, the Senior Divisional Officer for Indian Division, who doubles as the Vice President of this program, situate the context under which the meeting was convened.
So today the meeting was aimed for us to put on the organogram of this project, and as well as draw the budget for the project and authorize whosoever to do recruitment also for the project.
With the ball now set to be rolling, life in Bakassi is expected to change for the better.
Because we noticed that most of those who are appointed to follow the project in this peninsula were based at the Prime Minister's office and were all coming here once upon a time. But now, with the presence of a resident coordinator, I think life in Bakassi will never be the same again.
As they are gearing up to transform words into action, these committee members must note that poor infrastructure, lack of good drinking water, and poor health services are some of the basic needs of a Bakassi man.
And the bill, notably on the extension of the mandate of members of parliament, is yet to be discussed by the parliamentarians in the hemicycle in the nation's political capital. Yaoundé was expected that the bill was to be tabled yesterday, but it wasn't the case, as we hear in this report. Expectations were rife in the hemicycle in Cameroon's political capital Yaoundé, but they were all dashed at the end of the day. Ears were attentive, expecting House Speaker Kavayege Jibril to announce the bill on the extension of the mandate of members of parliament by 1 year, but it was not forthcoming. Honorable Kavayege Jibril rather announced the bill on the ratification of the 2018 finance law. The bill states that Cameroon's state budget stands at 4,689 billion 500 million francs CFA, up from 4,513 billion 500 million francs CFA adopted by the National Assembly ending 2017. Government explains that the increase will be generated by income from the sale of petroleum products, following increase in fuel prices, new taxes and financing from banking institutions. Another issue highlighted by government to justify the increase in the state budget is the splitting of the former Ministry of Territorial Administration and Decentralization into two ministries, the Ministries of Decentralization and Territorial Administration and Local Development. Thus, the budget had to be increased to run the two ministries and the Constitutional Council. The bill on the extension of the mandate of members of parliament is still awaited. Coming up, we take a look at government's efforts to develop towns, cities, and villages several decades after independence. Many parts of Cameroon are still in chronic underdevelopment, and it is within this context that the Cameroon government is now stepping up efforts to take the many parts of the country which are enclaved out of the difficult conditions in which inhabitants are living. We have details in the following report compiled by Fomi Armstrong Sanda.
Areas of the East region, like elsewhere in Cameroon, underdevelopment continues to show its ugly face, leaving most urban areas in Cameroon with little or nothing to desire. This is caused by the absence of a viable town planning program, under exploitation of these programs in places where they exist, and corruption. Other problems include the absence of a veritable local financial program for urban development and insufficient social housing. In places where few social houses exist, social critics say middle-class or well-to-do Cameroonians confiscate them while maintaining the underprivileged in slums living in precarious conditions. This is why the government decided to adopt a national urban development plan.
Avec la politique urbaine nationale,
with the national urban policy, we change the camp. We associate territorial actors at the base in the process of coordination of the actions which are being taken. Actions such as maintenance, we put in place a certain amount of equipment which corresponds with the environmental norms.
les normes environnementales.
These federated actions envisaged by government should be oriented towards the welfare of the population for the objectives to be attained according to experts. This was the focus of the East Regional Consultative Meeting on Stakes and Perspectives of a Sustainable Territorial Development in Betua. This meeting was an opportunity for experts to exchange ideas on views of enhancing the development of cities, towns and villages in Cameroon. During the meeting, focus was on transport sector, housing system and social cohesion. This program is first of its kind in Cameroon. It takes into consideration environmental factors and opinions from government, experts and the population.
Out of the country, close to 100 migrants, most of them from African nations, have arrived the Sicilian coast of the Sicilian port of Catania, and the Italian Coast Guard ship which brought the migrants equally had on board 2 bodies. Courtesy Euronews.
The Italian Coast Guard ship Dichotti has arrived in the Sicilian port of Catania with 932 migrants and 2 bodies on board. A further rescue ship is waiting off the coast of Libya for instructions on where it should go. The Dichotti was part of 7 operations organised by the European Union to pick up migrants from the Mediterranean Sea on Sunday. En route, the Dichotti dropped off some people in Lampedusa who required urgent medical attention. They included pregnant women and a minor. The operation comes at a diplomatically difficult time in Mediterranean politics, with Italy and Malta turning the Aquarius, with 600 migrants on board, away from their ports. The vessel near Libya belongs to the German NGO Sea-Watch and is facing similar difficulties.
That's it for the first segment of this edition of the Primetime Newscast on Equinoxe Television. Coming up in Talking Point, we shall discuss sickle cell anemia and, of course, the consequences of that health problem within the context of the World Day of Awareness on that hereditary disease. Stay with us. Thanks for joining us in Talking Points. We're receiving a medical doctor, Dr. Emerson Web-Gong. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
What is sickle cell anemia?
Okay, sickle cell anemia is a genetic disease of the blood. Basically, it affects the blood. Sickle cell anemia, generally, when I say genetic disease, it means it's a disease someone is born with. So it actually comes from the parents. So this disease causes a disorder in the blood. Normally the blood has a spherical shape, and so with sickle cell anemia, the blood actually has a crescent shape, like a half moon. And so because of that abnormal shape of the blood, what happens is that as it flows through the blood vessels, it becomes sticky and easily breaks. And because of that, the food, that's the nutrients and the oxygen that blood normally supplies to the body organs, the blood is unable to supply because the blood itself is not in adequate quantity.
How does someone come about having sickle cell from the parents?
Okay, like I mentioned earlier, sickle cell anemia is genetic. Means you're born with, means it's actually a gene passed down from the parents. So for you to be born with sickle cell anemia, you're supposed to be born from parents that have parents that are carriers of the sickle cell trait.
Yes, the sickle cell trait.
The sickle cell trait.
What is it, the sickle cell?
Sickle cell trait, basically, in a normal human being that doesn't carry the sickle cell trait or doesn't have sickle cell anemia, they have what they call hemoglobin AA. So sickle cell trait is what we call S. So if you're SS, your sickle cell, if you're AS, means you're a carrier of the sickle cell trait. That's that S is a sickle cell gene. So if you are born from parents who have the SS and they pass it down to you, when the SS meet, they form what they call, you end up with the disease sickle cell anemia.
And the consequences are damaging on the health of the carrier.
Well, it has a lot of consequences as far as the health of the carrier is concerned. Basically, the problem stems from the fact that you don't have adequate blood in the body. The hemoglobin cells you have in your body are abnormal, and so they easily break. And so because they easily break, you end up always in some sort of shortage of blood. That's what happens a lot in them. And so the normal lifespan of a red blood cell is about 120 days, but a sickle cell blood doesn't last up to 120 days, so it easily breaks, and so it brings about the complications you find in sickle cell anemia.
And this is because it causes the carrier to produce abnormal red blood cells. Mm-hmm. Now, how does that come to happen? Notably, looking at the way the sickness affects the production of blood in the human system.
Okay, as far as genetics is concerned, in the human body, for every part of or every cell in the human body to be formed, you have some genetics that actually happen. They will have what we call proteins, DNA, and all of that. I don't want to go into those details, but what happens at the level of the hemoglobin is that there's one of the amino acids actually that gets swapped. There's one glutamic acid is swapped with valine, and so when this swap occurs now, that's what causes the formation of the abnormal red blood cell. As a result, that's what brings about the problems you have in sickle cell anemia.
Now, for those who have children suffering from this disease, and for those who may have children suffering from the disease in the future, what should they do? What are they expected to do? How are they expected to take care of the child?
Now, if you have a child who's suffering from sickle cell anemia, the first thing you have to do is you need to be able to know the symptoms of sickle cell anemia. You know when the child needs medical consult, when the child needs to meet a medical doctor. So another thing equally, you need to know what to do in order to prevent the crisis. You know, the complications that arise from sickle cell anemia most of the times we call them crisis. Like have the painful crisis and all of that. You need to know how to be able to manage, to prevent first of all some of those crises and be able to manage some of them while at home.
Now, you're talking of prevention, and it is often said, and everybody knows this sentence or this phrase, that prevention is better than cure. Now, how to prevent the occurrence of having children with sickle cell? One of the methods I know is has to do with the electrophoresis
Hemoglobin
test.
Yes, hemoglobin electrophoresis.
Yes.
So basically, in order to prevent not to have children with sickle cell anemia, the decision actually belongs to the parents. So usually we advise people who are planning on getting married to come to the hospital to run some lab tests. And so on the list of lab tests we run, we have what we call the hemoglobin electrophoresis, as you rightly mentioned. And this hemoglobin electrophoresis simply tests your blood to know if you can procreate a child with sickle cell anemia. So when a couple comes to the hospital, for example, they run the hemoglobin electrophoresis test. If one of them is found to be SS, that's sickle cell anemia patient, and the other one equally has the S gene in them, that's you're either AS or SS. Both your advice, if you don't want to have children with sickle cell anemia, your advice not to get married or not to have children. Because if both of you are AS, as the genetics of it goes, you'll be able to, you have 25% chances of giving birth to a child that has sickle cell anemia.
So anybody who is tested, maybe SS, and the other partner SS, they are advised not to get married.
They are advised not to get married. If both of them are SS, then all their children are going to have sickle cell anemia, since both of them are SS.
But unfortunately, many people don't know much about this test. Many are ignorant, especially in the remote parts of the country. Many don't even consider it.
Yes, many people are actually ignorant, unfortunately, and that's one of the reasons why we have the sickle cell day. And this, the aim of this day is just basically to sensitize people and make people understand what sickle cell anemia is all about. And before you move into marriage with someone who equally is a carrier of the sickle cell trait, you should be prepared. You should know that you might end up having children having sickle cell anemia. So basically, people are supposed to be sensitized, taught about all of these things, so that before you move into making a child with someone who's equally a carrier like you, you should be aware of the fact that you can end up with a child with sickle cell anemia.
And most often, because of ignorance, we Africans, we attribute some the crisis that you were talking about to some sort of sorcery, to witchcraft and so on.
Yes, it happens a lot in the African setting, not only for sickle cell anemia, to many other diseases. Most at times we attribute it to witchcraft. Some people go as far as accusing the children that the children probably came with some sort of ill luck to their family and all of that, which is basically not it. So I think the advice we can give to our televiewers today is basically just to, before you get married or before you plan on having a child with someone, go to the hospital and get tested for sickle cell trait. So if you're a carrier, at least before you move into the marriage, you should be aware of the fact that you stand chances of giving birth to children with sickle cell anemia.
And of course, there are other issues that should be known, other health issues that should be known before marriage, other tests that should be done equally.
Yes, there are several other tests that could be done before marriage. An example of one of those tests is HIV. You need to know your HIV status, for example, before you actually embark on getting married with someone. Yeah, that's just one of the many tests.
And diabetes, maybe not diabetes, hepatitis.
Yes, you can have hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and all of that. Yes.
All right. So the advice is that before you get married, go for this test in order to avoid.
Go for this test in order to avoid sickle cell anemia. And another thing equally I would like to attract our attention to as far as sickle cell anemia is concerned is the fact that, and because of this abnormality at level of the blood of children born with sickle cell anemia, they are prone to having a recurring hospital visits. So they fall sick. They have the tendency to fall sick regularly, and so you have to take them to the hospital. And in a low and middle income setting like Cameroon, where we are, it's really very important for you to know before you venture, because if you are not financially stable, actually you find it very difficult to take care of the child that has sickle cell anemia. And so the best way is prevention.
But there's a problem of cost. notably talking about the electrophoresis blood test. It seems it's quite expensive.
Well, it's quite expensive, but it's not that expensive when you look at the consequences that might arise from you not doing it. Yeah, in many centers, many hospitals, they might have varied prices for you to do the hemoglobin electrophoresis test, but I think it's a test worth taking, because if you end up with a child with sickle cell anemia, you might have to spend way more than what you will have spent if you took your partner along to the hospital to run the sickle cell, the hemoglobin electrophoresis test.
An idea of the cost?
An idea of the cost, like I rightly said, it varies according to hospitals, but most of the times it runs around 10,000 francs.
10,000 francs,
yeah,
to prevent damages that will cost more than even $1 million.
Exactly.
Or billions,
exactly.
even.
Billions, or maybe just the pain of watching your child in pain, because
suffering.
At times the crises are really severe. The child wakes up and tells you he feels a lot of pain. You see a child of 2-3 years old crying of pain all over the body because of sickle cell anemia. At times it's not something good for a parents to see.
And you could even lose the child.
You could even lose the child, yeah.
Dr. Emerson Webgong, thanks so much for accepting to be a guest in this edition of The News.
You're welcome.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. Goodbye.